here, so
Yes.
so we can go ahead and at least have a quorum and get started. And I'll send to Mary Ann and Sarah messages, and hopefully they'll be able to join us shortly.
Okay.
But we will call to order, and as we are short our secretary, I will call the roll. Trustee Foss.
Here.
Trustee Burns.
Here.
Trustee Harris. Trustee Fruth here. Trustees Glavin and Monraj and Bloomshire are absent at this time. I received, moving on to community member and visitor comments, I received no comments ahead of tonight's meeting. David, did you receive anything?
No, there haven't been any tonight.
Okay.
And let me just remind everyone that just as we have with all of our virtual meetings this year, this meeting is being recorded, audio recording and video recording.
Thank you, David. And so we will move on to new business, our strategic planning. And our first item was thoughts for library support.
So thank you to Frances Kraft for not only for joining us tonight to talk about this topic, but for all of her work with us and for writing the document that I included within the agenda for tonight. And so Frances has joined us to talk about that and to respond to the board's desire to introduce whatever kind of learning environment we can introduce within our spaces or with our resources for this year's fall term. And so I'd like to ask Frances to introduce herself and to talk a little bit about what she and the library are proposing to do to respond. Hi, Frances.
Hi, David. Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me to your meeting tonight. I really appreciate it, and for thinking of the E-team in your hope to support students of Oak Park through this remote learning. In the past few years, it's been about 4 years since you all have offered such a supportive partnership for E-team. We have established the Power Partnerships program the last 2 summers, which has been really targeted at students in the 0 to 25th percentile. So when we're looking to support our most vulnerable students, working with the district to identify students and then working with their families. And then the library has just been such an important partner in all of that work. And as David said, we launched Ready, Set, Kindergarten, which we also piloted at the library probably like 7 or 8 years now. It was very small. We're up to 30 students, and we're doing a very successfully remote teaching 3 days a week. And then we do have story time with Nora and Jenny. We have yoga. We deliver kits to each child's home every Sunday with library books that Hal chooses. And we're doing the bead, initiative with Genevieve. So just so many places where we're able to coordinate with the library, and we're so grateful. So when David and I started talking about how could you support more students and families during this really difficult time, thoughts really went immediately to in-person. We've been there in person with 50 students at a time in the summers. We've had the tutoring center with the IMLS grant. And I'm always excited. Anything I can do with the library, I get very excited about it. But kind of like slept on it a couple nights and started thinking of, what the challenges would be. And I know that I included a lot of those in the document, and I hope it didn't sound really negative, but it was just very real, as a former teacher. And after being there for 2 summers with 50 children, what it takes to keep children safe at this time and keep library staff safe, And also with the concern that what does equity look like? Every year we would have at least 400 students who qualified for the 0 to 25th percentile for summer school years ago, and even to this day. And if you could only work with 50 or 60 students, it just leaves so many families out there without the support that they need. And also Hepzibah, Park District, I believe YMCA now, they are doing in person. So there are programs going on around the community. So all of the challenges really had us thinking, how could we really innovate and see how we could serve more families and children in working in a really strong partnership with the district. Now, we're meeting Faith Cole tomorrow, who is the director of multi-tiered systems of support. And we have been proposing recently to have, so this is E-Team in the library, to have this partnership with the district where we would be able to just like such transparency on teachers' lesson plans. You know, we've never been able, parents don't have that transparency. No one in the community does, and that's what our families tell us, where they would know everything that, for example, the second grade teachers are teaching this week, the lessons, the materials, the goals for the lesson, all of the supporting documents. So that piece would be really crucial to have that transparency. Also to have, to be able to connect on every child's learning platform. So Power School, you know, how are children doing? What are they missing? How can you support them? Like figure out what they do need as support, and then have a team that could support the family. So looking at all of these things that families are telling us where they're really like struggling through remote learning, could the library be that hub? Could the library be a center where we could have a team there with tutors, you know, tutoring online, but possibly, you know, this is up to you all, possibly having tutors there who could tutor small groups of students who would be in a learning group that we work with the district on identifying. Individual tutoring, but also one-on-one online, one-on-one in person, and small groups. You know, we could build it however, as we progressed, however it looked safe and effective. But to, in essence, as the document said, really make the library this place where families know they could get support and they could have connection to people who could support them. So that's kind of a wrap up of the document, but I can answer any questions or yes.
So Francis, so let me ask a couple of questions. If the students, oh, first of all, talk again just a little bit more about what specific students and what specific ages and what specific grades you think you would be targeting with this program?
I think we'd really want to focus K through 8 for a lot of students who need more support. Okay. But E-Team works with students all the way through senior year.
Okay. And if students are, so maybe let me step back even further than that question. Do you know how much are the students in K through 8 at least expected to be online each day in virtual instruction? Do you know that?
They're just now unveiling a lot of their plans, and they're going to have a town hall. D97 is going to have like a whole workshop, a parent university workshop next Thursday night that we're helping to facilitate with circles, but they are going to walk families through exactly how many hours a day their children will be on. They're pulling it all together. I think the parents in this group probably know more than I do at this point about how many hours. No, okay. Yeah, and so next Thursday night, they already have 500 parents signed up who are attending online. But that was another concern, David, because, you know, if it's I wouldn't expect more than a couple hours a day.
Yeah.
Online, honestly, with K through 8. And if we were in person at the library, that leaves, if you have a 7-hour day, 6-hour
Yeah.
day, that would leave a lot of time in person for what else
Sure.
do you have a prepared person to do?
And do you think, would you, in what you're proposing in this option 2, you would see that most of that time that the tutors would be spending with the children would be in a virtual environment online, like you are with Ready Set Kindergarten, for instance?
Yeah, I think a lot of it would be online. So some of our tutors, most of them are from Dominican, but we also have tutors from SLU, from Brown, from Howard. They're all OPRF grads, which is exciting. They're coming back, or they're currently in college, most of them. But some of them would do the remote tutoring from their homes because they're in Oak Park right now, or they could come to the library. Let me back up a little bit. What we're trying to create with the tutoring core is to build such strong relationships with the tutors among themselves, that in the training, it's not just tutor training, it's how to build relationships with the students that you are tutoring. So this is why we really want to have this strong relationship with the district, so our tutors could be embedded in the online classroom and get to know teachers who would be their mentors, and get to know the actual students, the D97 students in those online classrooms, so that they can begin to build those relationships. The library piece could be really helpful because we could meet as a team in person to continue to be this really strong team. What we've asked tutors who are interested in doing this is that, are you someone, they're mostly education students, they're going to be future teachers. Are you interested in joining an initiative that really is innovative? We're trying to create something that doesn't exist right now. And they're all the type of students, young people, who that is what they want to do. They want to be teachers, like the next generation of teachers. And this presents, they don't see it, young people. I have 2 kids in my 20s. They're like excited. They're very excited about the opportunity to do something that isn't being done yet. And they're future educators. So I think we have the opportunity to kind of change education in this sphere as well in Oak Park. So by being at the library, we could, whether it's meeting and planning, and also, so that would be like looking at different students and working with the district, who needs what, let's talk about that student. Let's talk about a family and what they need, and really kind of be this command center. But I could also see, maybe they could tutor virtually, each one in a study room on the 3rd floor, or, to have that quiet space where they're not interrupted in their own homes. They could really just, go hour by hour through students and tutor in a quiet space.
So regarding the library and its resources, then, I mean, obviously there's the space that we could provide. There's the technology that we can provide for the tutors specifically, but then potentially for individual students, if individual students end up coming in to meet with the tutors. What other resources does the library have that you think are pertinent to this work?
I think thing that I've been thinking a lot about is some space on your website where I think communication, I might be, it says my connection is weak, so let me know if
it's pausing once in a while, Francis.
Okay. So I think that a lot of families tell us they just don't get enough information from the school district. They don't know, they need help, but they just don't know who to call. A lot of districts in the last probably 5 or 6 years have created family partnership departments, the Department of Family and we don't have that at either district. And it's almost like the library could kind of become that in the community, especially in a time where the communication and the parents just don't know where to go. And our partnerships are a really strong partnership we have is with the PTO as well. So that could be a great way to with families, with the district, but the library to be like this hub where families would know that they could contact. We could have links. We could have a way to communicate if somebody is looking for tutoring or for other information in the community.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we have 4 trustees on the call: Matt, Colleen, Christian, and Ted. So I'll let them ask questions that they might have.
Yes, Francis, I do have a question. I've got a couple of neighbors where they've got kids who are rising seniors in the high school, and I'd love to be able to be tutors. And now you've got kids from Dominican and from other colleges. Is there a way that we can work with these kids who are juniors and seniors in high school to be tutors in the program?
I think we definitely can. So when I started 12 years ago now, an after school program at home, we really mostly did work with juniors and seniors from the high school and Dominican students, and it was very successful. They're great tutors. So I'm launched kind of like get started right now with the college students, but as the high school students get into their school year, Ted, I think that would be great to have high school students as well.
So should these kids, should they reach out directly to you, or as we get this library Francis Craft e-team thing going, how should they be in touch?
We can, so I have a flyer that I've sent out to the Dominican students, and I can just adjust it a little bit, you know, that it's not just Dominican, and we can, you know, if we have a plan, if this is the direction you want to go in, and yeah, we can have a flyer to direct them to me.
Well, thanks. I'm probably jumping before we even decide that we want to work with you, but I know that there are these kids who really, really want to do this. And these are, as you say, future educators. Yeah,
and it's important in this initiative that we are paying tutors. So we do have an initial budget that we are using because we weren't able to do the program at the library this summer. So we are paying our tutors, which is a nice incentive too.
And that's all about the money. We're going to talk about that, I think.
Hi, Francis.
Hi, Colleen.
I'm Colleen Burns. I have 2 D97 students, and I have 2 not yet D97 students. I'm new to the village, and I'm new to the board, and I don't know what the E-team is.
Oh, okay. I can tell you I'll give you a quick little summary. So I went into teaching when my kids were in high school and middle school in the area, and I started to hear about these gaps that existed by race and income. But I realized very quickly that I knew nothing, that, you know, I wanted to help, and, you know, that's all well and good, but I knew nothing. And so I decided, my husband kind of decided for me that I needed to stop running away from being a teacher, because my parents were teachers and I never wanted to be one. So I went to Dominican and became a teacher and started after school programs at homes, but quickly realized as a teacher that a lot of these issues are just systemic, and a lot of it is about race in the classroom and implicit bias and things that go on in education that so many opportunities are just blocked for kids of color. And so E-team, I left the classroom because I wasn't having any impact on the district as a whole. And I left to study policy, ed policy and management. And when I came back, this team that we had kind of loosely organized in 2013 got back together. And so we created a nonprofit, a 501c3. E-team is just equity team. We couldn't think of anything fancier than that. And what we do is we come at this issue from several different places. One is to innovate and create programming that is how education, we feel education should be, really celebrating kids for their gifts It's not all about assessment. It's about working with families. A huge part of it is the partnership between families and teachers and students. So in all the work we do, it's based on restorative practices. So we do a lot of work in circle. So the relationships are really the priority, because when kids feel connected to their teachers, they do really well. You can have a child who is in 3 different classes, and in 2, they're really connected to the teacher and do well. And then the third one, they just think the teacher hates them and they're failing. So we've been working this for years as a nonprofit, and we partner with districts. We work with teachers to show them how to build better relationships with their students and families. We work with families to help them advocate for their children if they need any support. And then we just constantly build community in circle with people in the community, with students and teachers.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do other trustees have questions for Francis?
I do. I apologize. I was trying to eat some dinner. I wasn't sure if this was the time to bring it up exactly, but it is something I would like your opinion on, Francis. So it's good to see you as well. Hope you've been well.
It's nice to see you, Christian.
So this is an issue I'm gladly going to defer to the parents on the board. I'll say that first, but I've been trying to kind of think through what my struggles with this have been and why I just can't really wrap my mind around it. And I think it's really that I love both the options. I think it's something that should be going on in Oak Park. I'm just a little unsure of why the library is opening up our spaces for it. And this isn't happening in one of the many D97 buildings or D200. That's just what I can't wrap my mind around. And if the goal, if they're saying it's because they want to keep people apart, then why are we trying to bring people together, even if it's smaller groups? Couldn't that happen in the D97 building in smaller groups? So that's what I'm struggling with. I really don't have too much else to say about it. I thought the proposal was great. I think it could be definitely benefit students in Oak Park, but that's my thought.
Yes, I agree with you on all that you said. That was another hesitation to me, to have 50 or 60 kids in the library. If it can't be in the schools, why would we bring a bunch of kids together in the library space? Something else that could be an option is that we start just completely virtual. Like we could have tutors in the library, but if I mean, you could it's what you guys would like to do, but if a lot of it is really virtual and not having kids in the library, we could start with that and see, then the comfort level, or if you wanted to then have, parents come in for a meeting with me and with tutors. I think there's a way to slowly roll it out as well, if that's something that makes, the board more comfortable. But I agree with you, Christian. Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you. That makes sense.
Matt, did you have any questions for Francis?
No. I mean, a little bit about the, the safety thing about, regarding our staff, any of the tutors and the students, it's, we're trying to balance those pieces together. And I think the idea of perhaps starting with a virtual, process, until to see how that starts might be, kind of puts me a little bit more at comfort with that. But I think we're at a good starting place to start having this conversation and kind of continue to work on some of these pieces. But I think the safety thing, and Christian, I think your question is right on the money with, we are one location, and with, and while we support and enhance the education work that is done in the schools and a partner, it just feels like many other places are picking up pieces of the kind of the various pieces that are up in the air, trying to catch the various things that are, you know, up in the air about the school year. You know, there's a lot of stuff coming down, and it's not clear who is all catching what at this point in time. So, but I think, yeah.
So Faith, I'm sorry. So Francis and I have a conversation scheduled for tomorrow morning with Faith Cole at District 97. And Francis, do you want to explain briefly what we're hoping to begin trying to accomplish in that conversation?
Sure. I think a really important piece of this with the library conversations, I mean, David and I talk about this all the time, and I have the feeling that you all have these conversations. How does the library, you know, what is the role for education in the community and a partner in education? And for us to really have impact with this initiative, we have to have a true partnership from District 97, which means that they are transparent with all of their, like, just everything, what teachers are doing, what their next steps are, how to support parents, just, you know, everything that goes into, as a parent, you're trying to help your child through this really difficult time. And you need to have all the information, and you need to have all of the resources. So, you know, for that to happen, I believe the district and the library would need like a data sharing agreement. That's something that's always been difficult. You know, if you've lived in Oak Park for a while, you may know that the districts really hold the community and parents at arm's length because of issues with lawsuits and their fear of letting people in and telling them what to do. And that's kind of across the country. Schools are really afraid that if they let parents in, they're going to be told what to do all the time. And so we've come a long way, I feel, in the last couple of years. And I think this is a great opportunity because they need the help now. The district really needs the community's help because this is a time like no other. And so I'm hoping that when David and I talk to Faith tomorrow, it will be kind of a turning point in saying, yeah, we need your help. We need help communicating with families. And like I said, the Ready Set Kindergarten has just been this extraordinary experience because when you just even like taking books, and I know you guys see this all the time, you know, at the library, but having that personal relationship and asking a family, what do you need? And I'm working with your child and I'm noticing she needs, you know, this, and this, and I have a resource. I have somebody who can work with her, you know, just small things like that, that it gives a parent confidence that, okay, I'm doing everything I can to get my child what they need. And so by partnering with the district, we'll have so much more information to be able to really target intervention for every child.
Thanks, Francis. Does anyone have any more questions for Francis right now? Francis, when is instruction for District 97 scheduled to actually begin? Do you know?
Oh, I before all of this, I thought it was August 21st.
21st.
Matt, is it?
No,
Or is it pushed back?
I believe it's like whatever the Wednesday or Thursday is, like the 26th or 27th.
Okay.
That
So
sounds right to me.
So
Yeah.
closer to the end of August then.
He pushed it back, yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions for Francis, I will let her go.
Thank you.
And then she and I will have a conversation with Faith tomorrow, and I should have more to share with everyone after that conversation.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks,
Thank you, Francis.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night. All right, Matt, where would you like to go at this point? Do you want to continue on this topic or move along?
Is it elsewhere on the agenda?
It is not, but I wanted to start with it because I wanted Frances to be able to join us and then then leave if she needed to leave. So we can again, it's totally up to you. I mean, so I have a few things that I want to be able to accomplish in this meeting tonight. I'm sure all of you have things that you want to accomplish in this meeting tonight. The list of documents that I attach to the agenda, I attach just as, again, reference points for various parts of the conversation. Not that we have to spend a lot of time going over any of them necessarily unless you want to. But again, there are just a couple of things specifically that I wanted to try to accomplish. But we can talk about whatever you want. Obviously, this is your meeting, and spend as much time on any topic as you want. So if there's more you want to talk about or more questions you want to ask me about this first topic, please go ahead.
Yeah, by all means, if anyone wants to have some more discussion about this, I'm welcome to it.
Yeah, I have lots. That's okay.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
So I hesitate to start the conversation without knowing the output of the conversation with the district tomorrow, because I think not only will that be informative, but it will be impactful on my thinking on this.
Okay.
I will say I have read the proposal. I also appreciated the presentation from Hepzibah. I still have very serious reservations about both. To Christian's point, safety is certainly a concern. I think my bigger concerns are related to the use of our public spaces. I didn't know the E-team in advance. I do know Hepzibah, just from the around town, but it sounds like the E-team does have a pretty good working relationship with the district. I know Hepzibah does. But I'm concerned that, to Matt's point about the library's role in all of this, the library is a safe space for our community. It's a public space, and thinking about opening that up to private organizations to utilize that space when the district is incapable or unwilling to do it, I have serious reservations.
Yeah, I think that that strikes a chord with me, Colleen, because I think, and David, I think will agree with me on this. There's been a lot of times over the years where a lack of will on various topics has resulted in the library taking the lead, and and sometimes it is seen with gratitude, and other times it is seen as us overreaching, our scope, because there is an issue in the community that we've tried to talk to other people about working on and taking action. And it just, everyone keeps talking of, in the royal we should do something. And then finally someone from the library, I think of Jim Madigan with the homeless coalition work that he did, and finally he just stepped up and started initiating stuff within the library, and everybody was kind of like, whoa, why is the library the one doing this work? Shouldn't this be someone else? And we're like, yes, it should be someone else.
Yeah. Ooh, right.
But no one else wants to, no one wants to put their neck out there on it. So
right.
Your comments resonate a lot with a lot of other things that have happened. Unfortunately, it's one of these things where I don't know if people are waiting for us to do it, or they just don't want to put their necks out to do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I don't have the benefit of that historical perspective, which I wish that I did.
No, but I think it's a thing that's common in whether it's government or other agencies. It's if someone is willing to wait for somebody else to do it, and not take the risk themselves, they're more than happy to let, if no one's pressuring them to do it themselves, they're more than happy to let someone else do it.
But we're also talking about a considerable amount of resources that would need to be dedicated to something like this, when
So, right. So, regarding the library's relationship with Francis and the E-team, that really goes back about 4 years. And so it started during, my time with the library. And that's when I really met Frances, was about 4 or so years ago. And it was a time when she was not having a very successful time developing good relationships or positive working relationships with a lot of the people in the administration in District 97. And so she and her partners, her cohorts, were trying to do their work to find ways to serve under-resourced, marginalized kids in the community who were who the children and their parents were both having a very difficult time navigating the maze of bureaucracy and resources in District 97. And the relationship really started, again, those 4 years ago, when she came to me and she said, do you think there's some space that you can give us here at the library once in a while, just so we can meet with parents who are looking for our help to help them navigate these resources and try to figure some of these things out? And I said, well, sure, of course. We have all kinds of spaces that you can use, meeting spaces, study spaces, whatever you need. And that's really how the relationship started. And it's just grown from there. Again, now to the point where, for the last several years, Francis and the E-team have operated an alternative 4-week summer school program out of our spaces called Power of Partnerships, and that was extraordinarily successful. And as they've done more of these things in our spaces, and as our staff and our resources have been committed to working with them, their relationship with District 97 has simultaneously improved too. And I think that part of it is that there was some evidence that working with strong community partners, that they could help to achieve a lot of objectives that I think people in the district would like to achieve. And so, that's just I'm really abbreviating the story here, but that, it brings us to today, where we're talking about, what can we do together to try to help the community figure out how they're going to manage this emergency situation. It led Francis and I to collaborating on the grant that she and I wrote a few months ago and submitted to IMLS. We're still waiting to hear about that. But I mean, really, the library's relationship with the equity team is really one of the strongest relationships with any community organization right now of any kind that we have. And it's the primary way that relationship, that partnership, is the primary way that right now we are responding to our own strategic priorities around learning and education. I mean, we certainly have positive working relationships and relationships that have gotten better over the last several years with District 97 and with District 200. But the one we have with the equity team is even stronger. And Francis, I think, really relies on us because she knows how readily and positively we respond when people in the community come to us and ask us to try to help the community achieve what it needs to achieve. So believe me, I appreciate all of your hesitations and concerns about doing this. I have them too, and so does Francis. And I think she's absolutely right. I mean, I've been very concerned about. I mean, we've been talking now for 5 months about the primary objective we have right now, which is to keep people safe and keep people healthy. And right now, that means keeping as many people out of this building as we possibly can. And I'm not prepared to change that in any significant way. And I think our staff would be very nervous and very anxious if we did. but even then, within this proposal, I think there's an opportunity to do something if we want, but in a limited way, but in a way that can still perhaps have some kind of an impact. Even if it's just giving a space to a dozen or so tutors that would come into the building during the day and work through technologically to help families, and occasionally maybe make an appointment to meet with a family or a student if they really need to sit down with somebody face to face. But I'm really going to depend on you and Virginia and Marianne and Sarah to say whether this is a direction that you want to go. The last thing I'll say about that is, if we do get this grant that Francis and I submitted together, that included lots of letters of support from other community partners, including districts 97 and 200, that money is specifically to help us to continue to build the capacity that we have to help the community achieve objectives around education and around learning. And if we got that money, I mean, it would be an amazing help, even to do things like what we're talking about right now. I mean, the purpose of that grant is to help to develop a way to create capacity around virtual learning environments. What can we do? What can community agencies do together to build and develop and create that and make it successful for teachers, for students, for families? So, but again, I mean, I'm really depending on you to tell me, how far you want me to go with this, whether you want me to keep going down this path, what you feel comfortable doing, so that when I continue having these conversations with other people in the community, I know whether I have your support about this or not.
David, when do we expect to hear back on the grant? I saw it in the proposal.
Yeah, so when we submitted it, and what they're still saying is that they're expecting to make the announcement sometime the first half of this month of August. But they also said that is depending on the availability of funds. The grant period, according to the rules of the grant, are scheduled to begin on September 1st. So in other words, any agency that gets the grant is supposed to be prepared to begin their grant activities on September 1st. So I'm kind of holding my breath now every day, waiting to see if there's going to be an announcement and if it's going to be positive, for us or not. I mean, if we don't get it, nothing for us changes. I mean, this is something that we propose to do if we can get the money to do it. But if we don't, I mean, again, nothing for us really changes.
Well, I definitely want to hear Virginia, as you said, David, Virginia, Marianne, and Sarah's opinion as well. I'm just curious if you've had communications with D200 or D97, David, and why, how they feel about this, why they're not opening up their spaces.
Well, I mean, yes, and as there was a conversation of the brief one with all of my 6 colleagues, or 5 other colleagues today: Carol, Joy Lynn, Kara, Jan, Gavin, and the simple answer to why they are not opening their spaces for instruction, because they have determined that it is not safe to do so, not safe to open their classrooms for daily classroom instruction. Now, that doesn't mean that some of their spaces are not going to be open for other related purposes. So for instance, what I heard today was that at least 3 of the school buildings, I don't know right now which ones, but at least 3 of the school buildings are going to be open for Hepzibah to go in and do what they typically do, which is help to care for children. And what I also heard today from District 97, from Carol Kelly, is that District 97, the board, has committed $1.4 million to help to cover the cost of the students who would qualify for what Hepzibah does to provide that service in this period of time. Some of those students, the way it sounds to me, would be in spaces in some of the schools. Jan Arnold and the Park District have opened some of their spaces. Some of the students would be in those spaces. And this $1.4 million, I understand, is going to be spent by the district to help to compensate families who could not, afford that. So these are, the way I understand it, these are all students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. So these are all students who are, at the lower end of the economic scale in the district. And so it comes out to like $30 a day per student, I guess. Those are some of the brief figures that were kind of thrown around today. I also, if I may have misunderstood this, but I also believe I heard Carol Kelly say, or perhaps it was Jan Arnold, that right now Hepzibah has met its limit of the number of kids already that it can accommodate. I mean, registration was open, and based on the number of staff that they have that to serve the students that they serve, whatever model they use, they've already reached their limit. So I'm not sure they can even accommodate any more students unless they were able to get more space and employ more people to do it. So yeah, I mean, that's right now the little I know about, how the districts are making their decisions and why, and what else they're doing to try to accommodate families that need more help. I mean, I realize that probably doesn't answer all of your questions, but that's what I know right now.
That was very helpful. I'm having an internal struggle with, is that equity? Is this equity? And
Yeah.
what does it really look like for these students right now?
Right.
So I don't have any answers.
Right. Well, and again, I think Frances mentioned this, but so she, unlike Hepzibah, I mean, the equity team does not charge. They don't charge families for the services. So their funding comes from other private sources, right? Grants, private donations, whatever they can get, and then volunteers. And the point of working with District 97 is that way, and getting the data sharing agreements and the other kinds of agreements between them and the district, is to make sure that they can identify the students from an equity standpoint that really need to have this kind of assistance, and focus on those students and on those families. That's another reason why, when we started talking about this, the idea of just opening up our spaces to families who just need to have another space to be, didn't to me, and to Frances, didn't sound like the right way to do this. Not, I mean, on the one hand, it's not safe potentially because of the pandemic, but on the other hand, doing that, there's no way really to know that you're achieving anything from an equity standpoint, right? Unless you have a way, a good way, a reliable way to identify the students and the families that need that you would want to target, you have no idea then who's actually coming in and using the space, and how and for what, right? I think Sarah has joined the call.
Sorry, everybody. I was navigating an unexpected loss in my family. So my immediate family is fine. It's just been a long day, and I'm sorry. This just wasn't where my head was an hour ago. So my apologies.
No apologies necessary, Sarah. Our condolences.
So what else about this do you want me to know before I have this additional conversation tomorrow with Frances and Faith from District 97, if anything?
I was just very happy to hear from Francis that we might talk to the District 200 students as well, if they could be tutors as well, because they are so eager to help. So it's not just going to be college students and all. So that's all.
Right, but that, but yeah, absolutely. But I'll say too that that is another great partnership that Francis has with Dominican University, and they're waiting. But they also need to know. They've told her several times, if you need to have our help, we need to know, because we're making these decisions now how these resources are going to be allocated. So, okay. All right. Well, Matt, where would you like to go from here?
Well, let's move on to the 2020 strategic plan.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So let me talk about a couple of documents here together, and hopefully you were all able to open these documents from the links that I sent you. So, besides showing you the 2020 strategic plan, the objectives, and the let me just bring it up on the screen here. Yeah, there we go. The objectives and the strategies that we outlined really at the end of last year for this year is just to show you, where we started this year. Now, what you're not seeing in this document are the literally probably hundreds of actions that are undergirding all of these strategies, all of the things, in other words, that staff is doing to further these strategies and achieve these objectives. And a lot of those things we're continuing to do in this environment, but a lot of them we've either had to postpone because they were not things that we could really do, reasonably do, effectively do in a virtual or digital environment. And then some of them, I think, would have to be either changed or postponed until we can. I mean, I'll give you one example. The example of through engagement and stewardship, of trying to do more within the community to share resources and to bring library services and programs out in the community. That was, one of those ideas was the grant that we wrote, that we got $25,000 from the state of Illinois, that we were calling pop-up libraries, right? So we were going to have these pop-up libraries in places like laundromats and other places. Very excited about that. Well, we can't do any of those things. So even that grant had to be changed. We had to go to the state for permission to change it. And instead, what we're doing is we're purchasing materials that we can actually provide, we can actually give to families in the community that we are identifying that need access to those kinds of resources. So I mean, that's just one small example. But even before we really start talking about later this year, beginning tonight, what kind of a strategic plan we want for next year, we really have to, I think, talk first about what we want to do about that regarding our or how that's going to be informed by our anti-racism journey. Because the point of this journey, of course, is to, as you talked a little with Rashida about the other night, is to develop a strategic plan, or to develop strategies regarding anti-racism that will become a part of our overall strategic plan. That's the point of the work, and that's certainly what the anti-racism advisory team is going to begin talking about when we have our first meeting with Rashida later this month. And that work is scheduled to begin now and then to continue on throughout the rest of this year, at least. That means that, we'll begin learning soon what some of those ideas and recommendations from that team are going to be to help inform our plan. But we're not going to have all of that information until closer, perhaps to the end of the year. So we want to be sure that we're leaving room, we're leaving space, we're leaving time. And Rashida is very concerned about this, and she and I had a long talk about this the other day, that we're mindful of doing that, so that we're not at the end, sort of including elements of our anti-racism journey in those conversations or in those considerations or in those plans sort of as an afterthought, right? She wants to be sure that we're anticipating in various ways that we're going to need to leave room, we're going to need to leave space, we're going to need to begin anticipating that. That's going to be challenging, I think, but it's not going to be impossible. I think one of the things it means is that we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible about what kind of strategic plan we're going to sort of leave this year with and enter next year with. We're going to need to be a little bit more flexible about how the time we give ourselves to think about that and to include those elements in the plan. Again, so it doesn't look like we're just kind of doing that and dropping them in as an afterthought. And that also has, obviously, I think, hopefully, implications for our budget too. Rashida and I spent a while talking about this because she wanted to understand how our budget process works. And I told her that, the board was going to begin talking about this soon. And I said that, we cannot, we could leave the end of this year without a completed strategic plan for 2021, because there isn't the same mandate to have a strategic plan as there is to have a budget, right? So the strategic plan is wholly ours. We have total control over that process and that timeline, and decide what we are and what we are not comfortable with. But that the same doesn't apply to our budget. I said we can't end the year without a budget. There are definite timelines there. We have to approve a budget by a certain date. We have to give that budget to the village by a certain date, and that has to be included in the village's budget and appropriation and levy request for next year. And so then that led to a conversation. Well, then what can we do within that process to make sure, that there's room for our anti-racism work? And I said, well, as the board talks about this, we can make sure that we're talking about how do we set aside, or how do we make sure that there's money that's going to be available next year for work that might be coming, that we might not know about right now, that we might not know about in November necessarily. And she asked a few questions that I think you'll want to sort of keep in mind as you begin talking about the budget for next year. How do we make sure that we're mindful about setting aside money to do things like continue staff education and board education and staff and board training around anti-racism work? How can we be sure that we have money set aside to expand whatever the advisory team might recommend about equity, whether that's regarding our policies or regarding the ways that we provide services or the ways that we develop programs? Can we make sure that we can set aside money for public education and public programs, specifically about anti-racism, even if we don't know right now, what those programs and what those events or what those trainings might look like and might be. And And my answer to her was, well, yes, we can. We just have to be very clear when we're putting our budget together that's what we're doing, that we're setting aside either a certain percentage of our budget or certain amounts of money within various categories. And she wants to be sure that as you're doing that, you're thinking about this again holistically. That in other words, it's not just, okay, we're going to put a little pile of money over here and we're going to call that the money for equity or the money for anti-racism. The idea here, and that's part of the reason why she also wanted me to share with you all this, trying to move this here out of the way. This protocol. This set of questions that we are to ask ourselves as we go about doing this work, to make sure that we're always thinking about this idea of anti-racism and equity within everything. Where does that fit within our strategic plan? Where does that fit within our budget? Where does that fit within the ways that we educate ourselves? Where does that fit regarding how we develop and approve policies? Where does that fit regarding how we develop public programs? So I think that I've been talking a lot. I apologize, but it is a lot, and it's a lot because this is a very different way of thinking about our strategic plan, our budget than we have up till now. And I think that it's going to require some changes, some adjustments, some transitions to thinking about our plan and all the things that go along with that through this equity lens or through this equity protocol. So this is ultimately your process. You approve a strategic plan, you approve a budget, but that's after you've advised me and advised my team about what you want that plan and that budget to look like, what you want it to include, what are your priorities, so that we can go back and work on that and then bring you back the kind of documents, the kind of plans, the kind of priorities that you want to see. So I guess again I'm kind of putting this back on you and asking you to think about that and talk about that now and let me know how you want to have those conversations. We're later on this month, we're going to have to start talking about our budget already and talking about what our income and revenue looks like, and then talking about what our expenses are going to look like and what you're comfortable with in terms of what the tax levy is going to look like for next year, right? That's why we start so early talking about these things. But I wanted, before we really get into the plan and the budget, I wanted to make sure that I brought these documents that Rashida gave me to you and let you know how she's thinking about this, and that if we're serious about doing this work, then we really need to center it as much as possible in this, and come at it from that perspective and that point of view, and be open throughout the rest of this year to learning and listening to what our staff members, particularly our Black and staff members and people of color, and what specifically the members of the anti-racism advisory team are going to be telling us about what they think about all of those things.
This is Ted. I have just a procedural question. The Anti-Racism Advisory Committee, how was it constituted? Because as a board member, I didn't really know this entity existed. So could you give a little bit of history about that?
Okay. Well, I apologize for that, Ted, but that was a part of the proposal that Rashida put together for us from the beginning. And she wanted to be sure that it included people who are on staff here at the library, that it included at least one library trustee, that it included members, stakeholders from the community, and that it included also people of different backgrounds and ages as well. And so I think we've achieved all of that. So we have several staff members that are involved, including me, Sarah Yale, Stephen Jackson, Tatiana Swansea. We have LeVar Ammons from the high school, who's a member of the group. We have Virginia Bloomshire, our trustee, who's a member of the group. We have one young person who's affiliated with the Royal Group, who used to be a student at Oak Park River Forest High School, who's now in university. Rashida was very careful and very thoughtful about how she wanted that group to be constituted. And we've got all of that information about the group on our website now, where all the other anti-racism resources are listed. And we're going to have our first meeting of the group next week. And if you want to look in the chat box, Billy, thanks Billy, just put the link to all of our anti-racism resources from our website there. If you link to that either now or later, the information about the advisory team is just one of the things that you'll find there.
David, I agree with a lot that you said. It would be hard to be real concrete about what we put in the for our objectives, I guess, this year and our priorities. But I think one of the things that we can do is commit to anti-racism work.
Yes.
In the priorities, and be explicit about that. You know, we've talked about equity in the past and other things like diversity and inclusion and things like that, but we can maybe now take the next step to just being specific about, as an organization, being actively anti-racist.
Yes. Right. And yes, exactly. And the point is that, just being, I guess, again, being prepared to have a process to develop our strategic plan, just look and feel a little different this year than it probably has the last few years that we've done it together.
Yeah, no.
Because again, you're right. While we've been talking a lot about equity and inclusion and diversity in our plan for the last several years, this is the first year where we're intentionally talking about anti-racism, and the first year that we would be intentionally looking at things through the kind of equity lens protocol like the one that Rashida shared with us.
Right. Agreed. So which category do you think that would fall under? A commitment to anti-racism, like under engagement, or?
Oh, I think there's going to be a place within all of our priorities: engagement, learning, and stewardship. Right. So I think that the entire plan and all of its priorities are going to be affected by our dive into anti-racism. But what those specific things are right now, I can't say. I don't think any of us can say. Again, I think the point is that we just have to be prepare ourselves now that this is going to be a process. This is not sitting down now and for the next few months or weeks and just writing out our strategic plan. It's preparing ourselves for what's going to come from, again, specifically the work of the advisory group, and how that will inform our thinking as we go on. But again, beginning now by anticipating that and leaving open the possibility that things are going to look differently, they're going to change, and to be prepared to include that within our thinking. So in other words, when we my intention is to begin the conversation at this month's regular board meeting about our budget, like we have the last few years, to come to you with information about revenue and revenue projections. So we always start, or have at least for the last few years, we start our budget conversations talking about revenue. What do we think about that? And what kinds of decisions are we comfortable, are we confident in making about that? In other words, how much, if any, of an increase in our budget do we expect, or do we anticipate? Do we want to ask for? What kind of an impact or effect is that going to have on the levy? And how are we making those decisions? So I think that, that's my intention when we come back in a few weeks to begin that conversation. Jeremy and I are going to be bringing to you, more information about what that looks like now and what we project that's going to look like. But that means, again, that, that will depend on you, the board, telling us, what your priorities are, what you think is important, what you think our responsibility is to the community, considering the emergency that we're in, considering the effect that that's having on families and households and taxpayers in the community. How should we be looking at that? How should Jeremy and I be thinking about that? How should the leadership team be thinking about that? So that we know we're coming back to you with the kind of information that you want to inform your conversation. And then from there, go on to thinking about how do we intend to compensate our staff next year? Are we going to continue with some of the plans that we've had regarding wage and salary equity? We last year we were very specific about what that looked like and what that was going to require. Have those priorities changed because of the pandemic and because of this emergency? Do we want to postpone that objective or not? These are all things that we need to start thinking about and looking at them through this equity lens. I think it needs to be one of the ways that we're thinking about these things. I provided you with links to a number of documents. Again, not necessarily to spend a lot of time talking about tonight, but so that you can be reminded of how we came into this year 2020 and what all of our plans were and what all of our priorities were and how we were thinking about things like equity and caring for our assets. How has this pandemic changed all of that, right? One of the things that Jeremy provided you with tonight was this summary of financial projections and showing you just a snapshot of what our fund balances are and what some of the spending is that we've already done and some of the spending that we've proposed, just to again give you a reference point. Even this information just in the couple of days since Jeremy provided it is already out of date because we've already, just in the last less than a month, have received an additional $2 million in tax revenue. So we weren't sure what tax revenue or the timing of tax revenue was going to look like this year, because people do have extra time to pay their tax bill this half of the year. But we already have an additional almost $2 million that we've received added to our available cash or to our fund balance, which means all that means is that where we know that we can continue doing what we're doing and paying the staff that we're paying well into 2021, which is a good position to be in. It's a better position than other agencies are in, but that doesn't answer the question. What do our priorities need to be regarding our budget for next year and the levy that we want to ask for. So I've been doing most of the talking here.
Yep. Yeah, I've started to kind of go through in my own head some of the budget items and thinking about what could possibly be different for how we budget for next year, given that
Right.
Once you look at materials at about 12%, David.
Yeah, about 12 to 13%, yeah.
And then somewhere between salary and benefits at about another
65 to 70%.
Right. And then so we're, let's say 70% between salary and benefits. That puts us up at 83%.
Right.
Of our operating budget.
Right. Yeah. So, right, exactly.
Where do we, and like and within that 17% of that, where do we move and reallocate things that, it kind of frames how we, at least how I'm looking at it for some of these things. But we do have, we had to discuss capital projects. I'm glad that we've proceeded on some of them, but I'm just wondering if we could talk for briefly, unless somebody else wants to go back to some of the other items, was what are some of the things that we had initially thought about for, that we had postponed from this year or we're thinking about for next year, mm-hmm. that we may need to reconsider as part of the initial stages of our budgeting.
Sure. Well, so
those are all going to be rather big ticket items, I think.
Yeah. Right. So right. So right. Yeah. So that's the point of this this document here that I'm sharing that Jeremy put together called Capital Projects Review. And so for 2020, 2021, and into 2022 and 2023, he's listed them. These are all from, or almost all from our capital asset study. And he has highlighted here in blue those that are either have been completed or are in process. He's highlighted in green things that we consider high priority because they have the not doing them has an effect or could have an effect on our ability to operate within a building or to provide certain essential services. And then highlighting other things that in our opinion can be safely deferred if we want to defer them to either save money or to defer paying things until after the emergency. So that's the point. That's the point of this.
So David, I have a question.
Yeah.
What happened to the parking lot resurfacing?
So that was done, right? Jeremy, that was because we've finished that resurfacing, have we not, Jeremy? Jeremy? I know he's on the line. The parking garage was resurfaced. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing that here.
Anybody hearing me?
Yeah, now I can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're talking about the parking lot?
Yeah,
the
parking
resurfacing?
garage.
Yeah, that was completed.
And
Yeah,
what
that's all done.
is it on this? Is it on this document, Jeremy?
I don't think so. This was what we had, I think, in May, and that might have already been in process when we were doing it.
Okay. All right. So the parking garage was resurfaced. So that's done. So
And
again,
by the way, with that, David, excuse me.
yeah, go ahead.
By the way, on that, the parking lot, it was way under the expected budget. I think we had budgeted quite a bit for that, and that came in much less than we expected.
Okay.
And now it may not last, 10 years or something like that, but it's something that we can do periodically to maintain the parking garage a little better.
Maybe, Jeremy, maybe after tonight, you can go in and drop that into this document as a completed item. Do you mind?
Will do.
Thanks. So again, these are all things that we have complete control over. We decide when we're going to do these things for the most part, and when we may defer them. Again, there are some things that we may not want to defer, even if we think we can. Things that Jeremy has listed as high priority. For instance, the evaluation of our security system, which really does need to be upgraded, or tuck pointing at the Maze branch, for instance, because not doing that could lead to bigger problems later on. But then there are other things that don't have the same urgency that we could easily defer if we wanted to. But because we have typically spent from our fund balance to pay for capital projects, they're not a driver of our budget in the same way that, let's say, how we pay our staff is. I mean, there is nothing that affects our budget obviously more than how we determine we're going to pay, compensate, and provide benefits for our staff. And that we've done a lot of work based on the board's priorities and directions for the last few years to advance equity in pay, to provide more benefits to more staff members, to expand those to part-time staff members and non-exempt staff members. And going into this year, it was our projection to continue making advancements on that, and to not lose ground. The projections that we showed last year and that are a part of some of Billy's documents that he provided for tonight, show some of that progress, and letting you know that if we wanted to continue to make sure that we don't fall behind, that we had projected 3% annual increases for staff all the way through 2025, making sure that staff members who needed to be brought up get most of that money that we budget. But again, if we have to decide whether this environment is a time where we can continue to make progress on that, or if we're going to need to pull back on that for a while because of the emergency and the effect that it has on people in the community.
One of the things I see there is it says assumes market equity adjustments in 2020, and then 3% increases annually through 2025.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if, and I haven't looked into this at all, but if because of the pandemic is the market, what was the market equity adjustment? Maybe I'm confused about what that part.
Well, it was, Billy's on the call and I'll let him jump on and explain that. I mean, basically it was looking at our organization against our peers and figuring out where we fit, how close we were to the market in terms of how we compensate our staff and the kinds of benefits that we provide. Billy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. What you're looking at is something I put together last year when we were going through the budget conversations. And we did implement the market equity adjustments, which the market is the library market. Equity is that we give larger increases to those that are below the midpoint, and smaller increases to those that are above to help our distribution around a midpoint. I received the question I think, Christian, you're asking is, did the COVID-19 pandemic slow down the growth or slow down increases, and how would that affect the increases we might consider? I did receive just this month, or I'm sorry, at the end of July, I received the library market data survey on benchmarking compensation and benefits. And everyone who replied to that, all the libraries, like 106 libraries that replied to that survey, the average projection is about 3% for increases. And that survey was completed in April and May of 2020, so during the pandemic. So at that time, they were still thinking that they'd be giving close to 3% increases for their library staff. I haven't heard much. There are some questions going around from HR directors and libraries saying, will that continue? But I haven't seen any information that says it's not. So it's probably because everyone's on a 1-1, right? There's a lot of people who are on a 1-1 budget year, fiscal year, and they're kind of waiting to see what their board's going to do.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's something I'm gonna have to give some more thought. But my initial thought is I don't know why we wouldn't continue that at 3%.
Why we would or why we would not?
Why we would not.
Okay.
I feel like we can continue to make that commitment.
Yeah, the 3% that we used here was a conservative figure that we could build in year over year. We may need to, if we make any adjustments this year, it's going to throw off what the projection might look like in 2025. Again, the distribution you're looking at right now is not ideal. It's not an ideal curve. We still have a number of our staff that would be below the midpoint. And that's okay, but just when we start taking percentages away from that, it's just it'll affect the distribution.
Right, Billy. I think the point is that the process or the plan that we've put in place every year gets us closer to the kind of distribution that we would want, right? So the idea is that if we're consistent about how we're doing this as we've planned, then we keep getting closer to what the ideal would be, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's. I mean, this is something, of course, we'll have to look at every year as we get through 2025. But yeah.
Right, and as Billy said, every year, what he learns from market data and helps to inform what we're thinking about. And then other things affect it too, such as laws regarding things such as minimum wage and other things.
Is there an updated one for this year, or?
So I just received the survey last month, and I'm beginning that work now. But so I would say in the next, probably not by the August meeting, but by the September meeting, I could have some updated information. There's a lot of work that goes into it, benchmarking all of our positions, looking at all of our staff. But yeah, to make it presentable, it would take me about a month or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, and I think that pretty well fits with again, the timeline that we've typically followed with our budget, which is, in August we begin with talking about revenue projection, talking about the board's priorities regarding taxes and levies, and from there we go on in September to talk about, again, the biggest parts of our budget, which are personnel, human resources, and capital expenditures. And we spend a month or so talking about that. And then by the time we get to October and November, we've made a lot of the substantive decisions that we want to make about the big things. And as Matt pointed out, by that time there isn't a whole lot left to really talk about, because the rest of it is a very small part of the budget. So I think that, again, if we kind of stick to that, by beginning in August talking about revenue, talking about levies, talking about taxes, talking about what the board's thinking about that is, and then from there go into September talking about human resources.
That sounds good. Yeah, I think I doubt this will happen, but if for some reason the new chart we get has 70 people in the fourth quartile, maybe then we wouldn't want to do the increase. But let's just wait till we see that.
Sure. So I don't know, how are you all thinking? Matt, how are you thinking right now?
Yeah, I'm kind of still churning through stuff around the salary questions, but I keep coming back to a lot of these capital projects in terms of how they, some of these items might impact how we are able to provide service under the current situation, and depending on how long this will continue to go, or we are in some sort of modified set of operations. And I'm looking at items like the self-check, and I know we put that as like can be deferred, but as a time when we're looking at whether trying to minimize personal interaction with the staff that's in the building, might that now, especially if we're not going to be doing programming in the veterans room, does that lighting item perhaps get downgraded to deferment and the self-checkout move up? That's an operational spending.
Yeah.
But it's like, in my brain, as I'm thinking about looking at this list and how those things go, perhaps.
Sure. Well, and there's other information that we're getting now that staff is working on. Particularly, you mentioned our self-checkout system that Elizabeth and Marcine are working on, because there's an opportunity that we have to acquire another product, a different product, a less expensive product that will actually allow people to use an app on a device to check out their own materials that way, just within the building, rather than having to take them to a specific self-checkout station. And we're thinking that we have the opportunity, if we choose it, to acquire that product and begin to use that in place of spending the money that is a sizable sum of money to try to either replace or upgrade our self-checkout system. So, in addition to what you're seeing here, there are other projects and other possibilities that staff is looking at to see how we could adjust or improve a process so that we, if we find that we have to defer payments on some of these things, we can continue to provide, the services that we want to provide. Lighting, the lighting system in the veterans room and the gallery has been a mess for a long time. And before we go back to a a more full service environment here at the main library. That includes bringing people back into the veterans room and bringing exhibits back into the art gallery. That system has to be upgraded, because it's all but useless at this point. So that's an important capital project for the main library.
Okay. Yeah, I just, as I'm looking at these capital items, and I'm also in the, my day job at the hospital, we're also going through our big end of year spending on like last minute, budget, items. So I've got a lot of facility improvement projects running through my brain.
Sure.
And like, as we're reprioritizing a whole bunch there, it gets me thinking, as I'm looking at this list, I'm looking at those those various things as well.
Yeah.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
Just a comment for the trustees to keep in mind that first page on the Q2 2020 financial summary. Is we're looking at these capital projects. I would go back to that and look at that. The planned high priority capital projects on that first section there shows 320,000. That's all of that included down there on the other sheet. So with that included, assuming we get the rest of our taxes, we'll end up the year with unassigned fund balance of 6.5 million. So that's kind of the watermark. Now we've collected, I think, near 2 million of that just in the past month and a half.
Yeah.
We're on our way to that, but I certainly agree with you to be conservative about moving forward with that. But I would keep both of those in mind as we look at the capital projects and deferring those.
Yeah. So yes, thank you, Jeremy. And to put what Jeremy just said in another way, my priority, and I think yours too, is for the rest of this year and into the first half of 2021 to continue to be able to operate as we are now, which means to continue to be able to compensate our staff at the level that we are now. And as long as we know by the end of this year that we have the revenue to continue to do that, then I think we would be safe to move ahead on any number of these capital projects. But we want to, I think, just be cautious to be sure that we can do what, again, I think our first priority is to pay our staff and to be able to operate with them. I don't think there's going to be a problem just based on what the revenue has already been just in this last month. But we still have a number of months to see what that looks like.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Matt?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so what else would you like to either ask about? Billy's here, Jeremy's here, Lori's here, Elizabeth's here. So anything that you would like me to know as we spend the next couple of weeks now preparing for the first regular meeting of the year where we really start talking in earnest about the budget. We have not yet tonight mentioned at all the master facilities plan. I think that my opinion on that is that, again, this is something else that a year ago when we were talking about this, I think we had some very definite ideas about where this was going. And then we got the data from our survey, and that informed that process even more. And then our world changed dramatically, very quickly within just a few weeks. And I think at this point, both considering the fact that we're probably not looking at reopening our physical spaces in anything even remotely similar to what normal looks like until well into 2021. And also considering that everything we're doing, including how we think about our physical spaces, needs to be informed by our anti-racism journey. I don't know that that we want to think about advancing in any real substantive way anything more about the master facilities plan until we really have more of that information and see what our our needs for physical spaces look like as we get into 2021. But again, I would depend on you, the board, to tell me whether you agree with that or whether there are aspects of that plan that you want to go back and revisit as we think about our strategic plan for next year.
This is something I was looking forward to for a while, doing the master facilities plan, and I was so glad we had started the journey. Unfortunately, and I've thought about this a lot, it's not the right time at all to go forward with, in my opinion. Let me not speak that matter of factly. In my opinion, it's not the right time to go on the plan. It was just.
I agree with you, Christian. I don't think it is either. I think it would. I think talking about that openly in the same way we were talking about it even 6 months ago, I think at this point would send a bad message.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I was, Christian, I also was very excited about this, and looking at how we would revision and perhaps reutilize certain areas, but now I can't I feel pot committed to it, but at the same time I can't find a real justification for pushing forward with that when we have very clear other more tangible issues that we need to be addressing at this time. So I'm comfortable with pushing this off for the time being. I just one of these things where I just don't want to. If it always feels like there's always something that we push off that we never come back to. I've seen it happen with stuff at my day job where there's some plan that we like, oh my gosh, we totally forgot about this thing, and with everything else going on, I just can't justify focusing on it too much, but but I do have concern that when will we get back to it? When will we have the ability to get back to it?
Every day, Matt, for the last 4 or 5 months now, I've had to remind myself every day that there's just, there's no playbook for any of this. I mean, we've had to make tremendous adjustments over the last 5 months, and we have. And we don't know how much longer we're going to be working in this kind of environment. And unfortunately, at least from my perspective, right now things seem to be getting worse instead of better. And that's not a good direction, but it's the reality. And I just think we need to acknowledge that, and while at the same time acknowledging all of the really, I think, extraordinary ways that our staff has continued to be able to serve our community in ways that I don't think any of us expected we were going to ever have to try to serve. So there's no, we're just, I don't want to say we're making this up as we go along, but in some ways, we've had to do just that, I think.
Sarah?
David, I'd be interested in, while this is not by any means the master facilities plan I think any of us would have been talking about 6 months ago,
yeah.
I do think, especially as we start down this path towards the equity conversation, that we are also asking our taxpayers to continue funding the library and the programs and services that we can provide while not allowing access to many of our buildings and facilities. And that is something that impacts in, you know, an equity dialogue, clearly more vulnerable individuals more acutely. You know, it's one thing to say, you know, it's not convenient or easy for me to spend time at the library, and, you know, the alternative is I can purchase books on my own or find resources or other educational tools on my own. Individuals who kind of need us most right now, I think, also feel the loss of having access and space. And we're making accommodations as we can, as you said, as we figure it out. But I would really be interested, and I think as you're talking with peers, I don't think this is a short game. And I think we're all confident, to your point about 21, may even be optimistic. So I'd really be interested in us talking about, as we look at the budget process, what are those access points that are going to allow us to really focus energy, staff time in the way to service the community, and whether that's, you know, additional resources for delivery or additional resources for creating, and I'm talking probably off the top of my head, but, you know, tented spaces for Scoville for next spring and summer to allow pod-based learning environments or access to book clubs. I feel like what I don't want to do is say, we don't know where we're going, so we're just going to kind of batten down the hatches. And I don't think that's what you guys are doing, but I think I haven't challenged myself as I look at the budget, think about, and frankly, given you the dictate to say, I want to hear creative, wacky ideas that are going to really allow us to continue to affect the equity conversation we want to impact, while knowing that's not going to be free. And I'd rather make a trade-off on something else, you know, that maybe we don't want to push off forever, but we can push off on the capital expenditure side as an example. If that means I can bring services to community members who most need it more quickly when we may be facing the same scenario 12 months from now. So that's kind of where my hat is as I'm thinking about the budget. And a lot of that is, you know, asking you guys and the staff to balance a lot of different considerations, but you're savvier and craftier than most library professionals I've met. So I kind of feel like you've probably been talking about these things, but being told, bring me your off the wall ideas may or may not be something everybody's feeling right now, but that's kind of where I'm coming from as I'm approaching this, to say, I don't want to have to talk to a community member a year from now and explain that Mays and Dole still aren't open, but we haven't really brought anything else to the table to make them feel like we're putting it out. You know, we're putting out our best ideas to do the most we can with the safety of our staff and the safety of the community at the forefront. You know, and it's easy, in some ways it's easy to say, hey, we're gonna keep everything locked down until it's safe to go back. But, you know, that by the time a vaccine is readily available and out to, what do we need, 4 billion dosages, right? So, you know, I'd kind of rather start sooner than later and really do some tough work as we go through the budget, feel like we've asked all the questions we feel like we can ask. So I don't want to speak for everybody. That's kind of where my head is at.
So Sarah, this is Ted. You know, we started the conversation with Francis Kraft, and we talked about budget and strategic planning. And in the next few months, we're going to have to figure out what to do. And how much money should we invest in our plan in the next 6 months to do whatever we do to work with District 97 or whatever. What money should we put there in that little pocket, however it happens, whether it's Hepzibah or District 97 or E-Team or whatever. I think we really need to think about, okay, how much money do we have?
I mean, we definitely have a healthy fund balance. Looks like from the projection that we got tonight, and so we do have a little bit of room to play with. I had a couple other things that are slightly in slightly different areas that I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
One from the employee race and ethnicity profile.
Yes.
And I probably had this information somewhere in one of the packets, but I couldn't remember, or I didn't know what each of the different grades was. As far as grades 1 through 4, 5 through 9, I just didn't know what that actually represented. So I was wondering if we could get that data, or if it was somewhere else.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, we can,
or
yeah, Billy has a document that lists every position title within each of those grades, and lists the salary or wage range for each of those as well. So if that's what you're asking about, yeah, we can provide that for sure.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And then the other one, slightly different area, but I know the library recently started the teen advisory board, which is great. Something also I was excited about for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think I got to sit in on a meeting maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was all virtual, and it was pretty well attended. They're still growing the group. I think there was about 4 teens on the call. But I think things like that, specifically that, are going to be key to engaging teens in something meaningful, engaging teens with the library in something meaningful. So I wanted to explore and you all to think about what it would look like to dedicate some significant resources to the teen advisory board in the budget.
Great. And you're all aware now, I think, that we have promoted Stephen Jackson to manager of teen services, are you not? Yes, good. Okay. So, so Sarah, can we go back and maybe just explore a little bit more about some of the things that you were saying? Because I want to make sure I'm understanding or hearing correctly. Because I think that there are always opportunities, and I think we try to take the opportunities as they come to continue to think and rethink, and do this sometimes through scenario planning and other ways, how we're providing the services that we're providing, and what we understand about what our community needs, and how that changes and how that evolves. And for the last 5 months too, thinking about what all of that means, and what we're learning about this environment that we're working through right now, that we're living through. And one of the things that I think I've learned is that we have an organization that has the capacity to almost overnight completely change how we are serving people. I mean, to be able to move from an environment where almost everything that we're doing, not everything, but almost everything that we're doing is in a physical environment, to almost overnight going to an environment where everything is digital and virtual, and to do it as almost seamlessly as our staff was able to do that, convinced me like nothing else of how capable and how innovative these people are. And one of the other things that has made me think about is, how much more do we really need to think about continuing to provide our services in a way that is really centered, as much as it has been, on our physical spaces. We don't know how much longer we're going to be working in this environment. And we don't know how much longer it's going to be before we can safely bring people back into physical spaces. But we know that people are going to continue to need and expect our services that they're paying for. And you're absolutely right. We have to think in ways that I don't think we've ever been forced to think about before, how we're doing that, not just this year, and maybe not just next year, but maybe forever. Because I'm not sure, I don't know. I mean, this may be a really revolutionary moment where we never go back to the normal that we had before. And if that means that we don't, I think we're always going to need to have, obviously, our physical spaces. It's not that we're going to give up all of our physical spaces and everything is going to be digital and virtual. I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen. But what I am suggesting is that do we want to continue to base as much as we do on the physical spaces? Do we even need in this community of Oak Park as many physical spaces as we have been maintaining and operating now for all of these years? Do we still need to have 3 physical buildings that we are operating in and maintaining? Is that really what our community needs? I'll give you one small example of what I mean by that. We have a community that is getting older, that cannot necessarily use physical spaces in the same ways that other people can use them, or even wants to necessarily. While we've been closed, however, we've gotten any number of contacts from patrons, particularly who live near our 2 other branches, such as Mays, who, while they can manage to travel to that space and they find that space accessible, they're telling us they don't feel that way about the main library and coming here, and they don't want to, and they're not going to, right? And that's for a variety of reasons, because they find transportation challenging, because they find the building to be too large, because there could be any number of reasons why that they're telling us, and they're anxious about the fact that they are finding it challenging to take advantage of library services when they can't go to the Mays Library or they can't go to the Dole Library. But when they find out that we have people who will deliver materials to them, that there are other ways that they can get the things that they need, some of that anxiety is alleviated. And I think that it's just one small indication to me that I think we need to continue down this line of thinking about what kinds of physical spaces we've had and maintained for a long time, and whether that's really the best way to continue operating as an organization. So, if that's the kind of thing that you were talking about a few minutes ago, then yes, I completely agree. But as long as we all understand that's some substantially different ways of thinking, that can lead to making decisions about things that are going to bring us to a different kind of an organization that looks and feels very differently than it does now. And, as long as we're prepared to have those conversations and do that thinking and go down that path, and, I'm all for that. But, I want to be sure that we're all on the same page there, that we're all thinking about that the same way.
I hadn't jumped ahead to kind of thinking about, and not to, drive drama, but physical closure of facilities permanently. But I don't think that shouldn't be on the table, especially as we're talking about conversations that, could in turn be about, what's in the long-term best interest of the taxpayers. If we determine that a year from now, those buildings have not reopened and we've solved for that in other ways, and in doing that closure, we're returning a significant, I live in your maze, I'll be devastated, but I haven't been there since you closed and I'm fine. So I do think it's incumbent on us to ask those questions. I think where my line of thinking was going was more around, David, kind of thinking through, especially as we're exploring some of these questions about equity and led through this conversation with Rashida, if, what we find in this discussion is that the one thing that is really most missed in physical space is, consistent access to a librarian who can help me with job searching, or a piece of technology that I don't have, and there's a barrier to me having that on my own. I just want to, I think, ensure that as we're thinking about the budgeting process, we're not so locked into, to your point, that we're going to go back to business as usual, that we don't ask questions about what are real, services we need and should be providing, and what do we need to do that effectively in this new state of being. I, for one, am a parent with small children, so I will argue I always will bring myself and the children to a physical space if one is given to me, especially in the dead of winter. But it probably won't be this year at the library because we likely will be, locked in our houses again. But I do think, while I argue in many ways, and I think all of us have, that the library has offered kind of this community center environment, the bottom line of what we've been asked and charged by the community to do is provide the services and resources we provide. So kind of what can we do to make sure that is being done to the best of our ability, and what do we need to know that your staff and team want to spend differently? And to your point, maybe that's not a short-term question. Maybe it is a long-term question. I think I was thinking of it in this, new COVID environment that I anticipate we're all going to be in for the next year.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think we are. Yeah, for sure.
And I don't disagree with that line of thinking. I mean, I'll let everyone else speak now. I know I'm talking too much.
Yeah. Well, again, please don't. I mean, I'm not suggesting that we shut down our branches tomorrow. I'm just saying that, we, there's a lot of talk right now about, what really is normal, and was normal so great to begin with, and is there really going back to normal, or a desire to go back to normal, and when is that anyway? And yeah, so it's I mean, right now it's just been, it's, as you can imagine, a challenge just navigating the environment that we have for the last 5 months, and keeping people engaged, and keeping people safe. I mean, those things alone have been a full-time job just in the last 5 months. All right, Matt. So what time is it? It's 8:44. So where do you think we are? You're muted, Matt.
Well, that's the $64,000 question.
I mean, for tonight, where?
For tonight, yeah, no, but it's still, there's just it. I feel like we've had a reasonably good conversation given the information we have in the situation that we have.
Yeah.
There's still so many moving pieces regarding, what is the health, the public health, landscape, the education landscape, what are our partners, other government agencies going to be doing.
Right.
So
Yeah, well, I'll be learning more about that shortly too, right?
Yeah.
The Park District is in the middle of a budgeting process as well.
And we have our COG in the morning.
That's right. Yes, we do. You and I have an 8 o'clock meeting in the morning. You're right. We do. All right. So may I ask or say a couple other things quickly? As I told you, our regular meeting at the end of this month, it's my intention that we're going to come to you to begin the conversation about the budget. That begins with revenue projections. What do you want to be sure you have and are seeing for the beginning of that conversation? What do you want to see? I mean, typically, we show you what past revenue has been. We give you a view of the last several years. We have information to project what it could be for the next several years. We always give you various scenarios depending on what your priorities are about the levy. But what is it that you would want to be sure to see so that Jeremy and I can prepare accordingly? And if you're not prepared to tell me that right now, it would be very helpful if you could send me that information within the next couple of days, because we have to begin working on that so we have time to put some documents together for you.
I really, after Francis Kraft's proposal today, I would like to know what the implications and what the costs would be for us to open Mays and Dole for whatever entity could be there to use the space, whether it's District 97 or HEPZBA or E-Team. What are the implications? What are the liabilities?
Okay. And again, Ted, there's no indication right now that those organizations want to use those spaces. We've said that they could be available potentially, but what they've said to me so far is that they don't intend to use them.
But what would our financial implications be?
Okay, we'll need to think about how to answer that question. At this moment, I'm not sure how we do that, but because I don't know what all of the variables there might be, but we can think about it. Other things you're prepared to tell me now that you want to see for that conversation?
David, and I'm not sure that Rashida, if you brought this up earlier, my apologies, has been able to share, estimates associated to organizations maybe of our size that have undertaken the work that we're putting forward to see, are there any significant cost implications we should be thinking about, and I don't know what to base it on. Clearly, as we talk about it, every element of our strategic plan may be impacted. I think it's difficult, though, to think about what are the cost implications. I, as an example, feel like we should be providing funding for the committee and potentially the employee resource group, for them to be able to bring in speakers or do programming. But I don't know broader costs associated with things like, I know we've talked briefly with Billy in the past about, for recruiting, should we be thinking about working with, more diverse recruiting firms, or, putting out different kinds of scholarship incentives to draft or appeal to candidates of color. So I kind of would love Rashida's thoughts if she has any ability to give us some perspective on, what we may want to be thinking about.
Well, again, I think that a part of that is waiting to listen to the conversations that come from the advisory team, and they haven't even started. Their first meeting is going to be it's going to be next week. And honestly, Sarah, I don't there aren't a lot of examples of similar organizations that have or are even beginning to do this work in the way that we're doing it. And I don't mean to say that there aren't other library organizations that are talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and doing things about that. But what we're doing with this anti-racism journey is something different. And I don't know if there's a lot of examples there. Again, what Rashida has said to me is that we just need to, she wants to know that the board is going to be prepared and open and flexible enough to think about this journey every step of the way as we talk about our budget and our strategic plan, and ask the kinds of questions that you've just asked. What does that mean for money that we budget for staff resources? What does it mean for money that we budget for programs and events? What does it mean for money that we budget to recruit staff members? At the same time, we have a budget, and we have a certain amount of money that we have to spend, and the decisions that we make is how are those financial resources going to be allocated. And it may mean that in order to do some things, if in other words, if anti-racism and all of the work about that is a priority, then other things might have to stop being a priority. We might have to stop doing or change how we do some things in order to do something else. If we want, for instance, to create more opportunities for learning specifically about whatever issues we decide are important to our anti-racism journey, we might have to stop spending resources on other things that we've traditionally done that don't necessarily advance that objective. And again, I'm not prepared right now to say what those things are, but I know very well that what often happens is we begin having conversations like this, where we say we have certain limited resources. If we're going to do something new or something different, we might have to stop doing something that we've been doing for a long time. And that's often where we get trapped, because we're often loath to let go of things that we were doing before. And other people might get angry that we're making different choices and doing different things. And we're not going to do this thing that we always used to do, that you're very used to doing, because we need to do something different, something that we've determined is frankly a higher priority. Those are hard decisions. And I guess what I'm saying is I want to know that we're prepared to make those hard decisions and say and defend the decisions that we make. This is a priority now. We're going to do this, which means we may not be able to do that anymore. Does that make sense?
I think a silver lining might be that everything's changing right now,
right?
And that it may be an opportunity to change in that direction. I think to your point, and I guess what you've already started talking about, one of the things that was said in her report was that, and I'm paraphrasing, but a lot of or most of the library's funding goes to support white people or something to that effect. And I remember we talked about that in our follow-up conversation with her. So I guess as you and Jeremy are thinking about the budget, even this year, even though we don't have all the information yet, just already thinking about how we can shift that starting now, so that we don't have to wait another year or wait till we get the report back. But how, and as you all are looking in the budget, how can we already start to shift that?
So what do you want? When we come back together in a few weeks to begin talking about this, and specifically to start talking about revenue, what are your priorities? What do you want to see to begin that conversation? What is going to help you to have that conversation? Because I want to know that Jeremy and I are working on exactly what it is that you want to start with. What do you want to see?
Well, one of the things I was chatting with Billy about it, but if we could get the racial, the employee race and ethnicity profile broken down by grade and how that plays out along racial and gender lines would be nice as well. And so I think he already said he was working on that, but.
Okay, great. What else?
I think, I agree. I don't know. I mean, I want to go back to Sarah's point. I think it would be helpful to get some type of idea of what's an example of a program that we may implement, and like what kind of the cost around that might be, just to get some idea. I mean, even if it's a large range, I mean, are we talking 0 to 500,000? Are we talking 500,000 to 1.5 million? I mean, even if it's a big range, we just have zero idea of kind of.
Sure. No, but are you saying though, Christian, that you need that information for this month in order to begin talking about what your objectives or priorities about revenue and the kinds of revenue we ask are going to be? Because that's where we're starting this month. We're really just starting with priorities around revenue, taxes, levy, and then again from there we go on and we start talking about the expense side of the budget.
Well, I guess the question. This is just about revenue. Okay.
I mean, this month that's typically where we start, so that because once we understand what the board's priorities are about that, what kind, for instance, what kind of increase in our revenue, if any, you're comfortable with? Is it 0? Is it 3%? What is that? What does that look like, and why? And what is the rationale for that? Then we know from there what kind of an expense budget that we want to start thinking about and how we're going to allocate those resources. So in other words, if we leave the August meeting knowing, and I'm just going to make this up, that your priority is no increase, the community is in an emergency situation, and what we've heard is that we cannot sustain any kind of an increase, so we need to stay flat, right? All right. Well, that tells us a lot. That tells us what kind of budget then we need to put together. So that's what I'm saying. In order to help you to have that conversation, to establish those priorities so that we know where to go from there, what is it that you want to see this month to help inform that part of the conversation? Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. Thank you for explaining that. So then in that case, I think the only thing that might be helpful to know is if, I guess, Rashida or we think any of the recommendations may have a significant impact on staff pay, I guess.
Okay.
Because that may
and development as well. I think because some of this may not come out of the salary line as much as it comes out of the board and staff development, that sort of piece. So I think, do we anticipate, to Christian's point, this, how the big pieces, I'm in my mind, I'm thinking by somewhere just a starting point of 2% for on the levy increase. I know other, from early statements I've seen from the village trustees, given their, they have a different funding structure because of all of their fees and other money they collect. They're probably not going to be, a 3% increase. They're probably going to be higher to make up for all the lost non-property tax revenue, my inclination is to start with a 2%. I know we have an expiring debt service, which gives us some leeway in that, but I don't want us to. I would prefer to not think of that as a blank check. If anywhere up to $1 million, if we spend 500 of that $1 million, saying we're increasing our operating budget this much, but hey, we can still claim that we cut your taxes by $500,000. I'd like us to. It'd be an easy out for us to do that, and I would prefer us to think a little bit, more, more in line with our usual process, and not think that we have the piggy bank bust open for us on this.
Okay. So I can, what I hear is you want us to show you what a 2% levy increase looks like, right?
That's where unless anyone else is anybody else feeling a different number, or?
Well, we can.
I'd be interested in, if you're running the numbers, I guess, I don't know if it's realistic to stay flat, based on what we're trying to accomplish in the pay equity conversation, but I think the two pieces, to Matt's point, the biggest number in the budget is affecting pay and changing that dynamic. So I feel like having Billy run the numbers for us on, maybe what 3% increase looks like that would have gone towards what we wanted to do, and maybe a couple of steps down from that, so that we can understand how that fluctuates and what that does to our plan. I appreciate it's a step back, but I also, understand the sentiment of the community right now. So I feel like that's the biggest piece to me that I feel like I'd like to see.
Okay. All right. Well, we can run various scenarios, but we can make 2% sort of the one we focus on, and we can go a percentage point each way if that would be helpful to you.
Yeah. To be clear, this is
Jeremy. I think it would.
Just to be clear, that 2% is on the operating revenue or operating levy, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Basically,
yes.
You're saying forego the full amount for the debt.
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think
what Jeremy is saying is that if, as you pointed out, Matt, there is the bond debt is now officially retired this year, and so that final amount is sort of there on the table. And if we were going to make that amount a permanent part of our levy request, the total increase would be more than 2%. If it's 2%, then a portion of that is released. And based on what you said, Matt, I think you understand that. I think Jeremy just wants to be clear in his head that that's what you mean, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Jeremy, is that clear, or are you not clear about that?
No, that's clear.
Okay, great. Thanks. And we'll show, when we show you the projections, we'll show you what that looks like. We'll show you what that dollar amount is, and we can fit that into the range of percentages. So, if the increase is 1%, that this is how much of that is released. If it's 2%, this is what it is. If it's 3%, this is what it is. Right? Okay. All right. Is there anything else that you want me to know before we begin working on that? And again, you're free to contact me offline, call me, send me an email in the next few days of other things you think of that are going to be important to you to help you have the conversation.
Christian?
I do have one question for the board. I guess maybe this is just something to think about, or if you have an answer, but what is our goal with the fund balance at this time? Is our goal to increase it? It's emergency time. Are we drawing down on it because it's an emergency time? Like this is one of the reasons we have a fund balance, is so that we have resources in times like this. So I'm still thinking on that. I'm not sure. But I'm also curious to see, and maybe that's in future months, but what it looks like to play around with that fund balance a little bit, and if we did draw it down and prioritize some different things. So I was just curious what other people's thoughts on that were.
I mean, to me, I think that's kind of a prime point for us to talk about with the anti-racism work. You know, that if there's a reason for us in this moment, I feel like to really take a hard look at that fund balance. Christian, I feel like that those kinds of questions. Clearly, I also want to be mindful to plan for it as a standard expense, that it isn't something that we kind of hold over here and only have within the fund balance. But I feel like, especially as we're setting things up and getting started, but I also think as we're talking about some of these larger discussions about how we work and, what's changing for our operation for the next year, that's another area that I might consider looking at the fund balance to answer with, in a measured way, not emptying it out, but, but giving us that flexibility.
Thank you all. Okay.
Colleen or Ted, do you have any last thoughts?
No, I would just say that it's something that I've been thinking about too.
Lots of thoughts, but nothing to say.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
Right. Well, that's all I have, Matt.
It appears we have concluded all of our scheduled business and per our agenda, and we stand adjourned.
Thanks, Matt.
Good night,
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.